All right, so let's start with Ohio.
Let's start with Ohio.
So two important measures were on the ballot there. One, abortion, and we can put this first element up here. The second one being marijuana. And so back in the summer, as you guys remember, there was an effort by Republicans to change the way that the Constitution is amended to put the threshold at 60%. So you would need a 60% vote to change the amendment. That was happening as support for abortion rights was polling in the high 50s.
Right.
And everybody thought, oh, they're trying to keep this from passing. If they had succeeded, they failed. If they had succeeded, this would have failed. Abortion would have failed because currently it's just under 57% support. So an overwhelming vote on, and we can put up weed too. Weed actually edged out the abortion rights. So you did have, non-trivial number of people go into the ballot box and say, yes, I support legal weed. No, I do not support abortion rights.
But a really similar margin, which
Right.
is interesting as well.
It's maybe thousands of people
Right.
at most around the entire state. And so both of those are going to become law. You're going to have legalized and regulated marijuana sales opening up in Ohio. But also the big win there is question one.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
So now you've got abortion rights enshrined into the Constitution in Ohio. This comes after Montana, Kentucky, obviously California, Vermont, not that exciting, Michigan. So Kansas, everywhere that abortion rights have been on the ballot, abortion rights have won. So what's been the response? I've seen a couple of different responses. I'm curious what you're seeing from the conservative wing, which, do they want to give up on this and say, like, this is a huge loser for us? Or like the kind of Republican Senate president, are they saying, let's push ahead and see if we can get this on the ballot again next year?
Well, they know they can't give up on it because Democrats now see this as such an important electoral issue because it drives turnout and it brings independent leaners over to Dems. And on the principal issue for Democrats, it accomplishes, again, like enshrining a right to abortion. The wording in this became somewhat of an issue. Issue one, the wording of it opened up the door for Republicans to come in and say, potentially this is going to lead to all kinds of issues with same-sex bathrooms, different sex bathrooms, co-ed bathrooms.
Right, they tried to move away from abortion and over to other culture stuff.
And I think there was a real problem with the wording to the point where even the Toledo Blade said, listen, we support abortion rights, but the wording here is overly broad. This is an overly broad power. Obviously, that didn't make a difference. 57 to 43 is roughly the margin in both the weed and abortion races, but
and
Republicans—
this probably comes from Democratic squeamishness about saying the word abortion. Is that right?
It might.
Or do you think it actually is a broader agenda?
The
trying
wording—
to be smuggled through?
Yeah, the wording is pretty interesting, but Democrats were like leaning into this every step of the way. I shouldn't just say Democrats because obviously this is the broader left was fighting this really hard. And Republicans, this is what I've heard a lot on the pro-life side, conservatives were wildly outspent on issue one. So it's about 24.4 million to about 16.3 million. And pro-life groups have a really hard time, anti-abortion groups have a very hard time getting money into these races. So it might be easier to fundraise for just a generic Republican race somewhere like Ohio than it is to get money for an anti-abortion initiative. And that's why that ballot measure that we covered back in August was so important because all of the pro-life groups, I've talked to a bunch of them over the last few months, saw the writing on the wall. They knew that if they could get to that 60% threshold somewhere in Ohio, there's basically no way that this would pass. It did come close, but they knew that if they could, say you need 60% to change the Constitution, that it would be safe from their perspective. Now, that 57% number, I pretty much guarantee all along they knew it was going to be 55, 57, somewhere like that, because it's an almost impossible issue for Republicans, even in places like Ohio and Kansas. And next year, Arizona, Florida, Nevada, Colorado, South Dakota are looking to get similar ballot initiatives together. So Republicans had Michigan, they had other Kansas, Montana, as you mentioned, all of that told them that this was going to happen. They just couldn't get donors interested, and they still haven't figured out the messaging.
And so you have Republican Senate President, who I just referenced, Matt Huffman. He said in his statement last night, this isn't the end. It is really just the beginning of a revolving door of ballot campaigns to repeal or replace issue one. So the Senate president saying that they're going to continue to try to put this on the ballot. But help me understand that. They know that they're going to lose.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're going to be outspent because a lot of wealthy Democrats are strongly for abortion rights.
Right.
And they don't, I think a lot of wealthy Democrats give to Democrats because they kind of align with their politics, but they don't really like that Democrats might raise their taxes a little bit, might mess with the carried interest loophole, might do some regulation around private equity, which is where all their money's coming from. But when it comes to funding abortion measures, they're fine with that. Like no moral confliction whatsoever. Like this it feels good to them. It's the right thing to do. Many of them have experience with it. It's deeply personal to them. And so there's always going to be money for these ballot measures. The public is wildly on Democrats' side on this question. It brings people to the polls and hurts Republicans, and we'll talk about how it hurt Republicans across the board in the rest of these elections today. So then why would you have somebody like Huffman say, we're going to just keep doing this?
And by the way, they said something
Not
similar.
that I'm against him doing it. Like, go ahead, keep banging your head against the wall. But
yeah, so for the last couple of years, especially since Dobbs passed and Roe fell, Republicans, conservatives, anti-abortion people have said it's time to, on the messaging level, confront this head on. That's where you saw Ron DeSantis sign the heartbeat bill, and other people have signed. Texas had a heartbeat bill saying, all right, so Roe is gone, and in the vacuum that creates, so that you can't just sort of punt and say I support the end of Roe. You need to have a clear stance that is honest, and it needs to confront the issue boldly, and you can't just run away from it. And so that's what a lot of these groups have been counseling candidates to do. That's where Lindsey Graham and the Susan B. Anthony list worked on that 15-week measure on the Senate side to give Republicans something to talk about. Glenn Youngkin was pretty clear that he said, if I'm elected, I'm going to limit abortion rights. And that didn't do so well in Virginia, and there were a lot of abortion ads on it. Let me read a quote from Lila Rose. This was part of her statement. She's from Live Action, a big anti-abortion group. Lila Rose said, the pro-life movement must adapt to win. We have to throw out the old playbook and dive headfirst into a strategy that can win the hearts and minds of the American people and translate into electoral victory. So just what you're getting from that is increasing acknowledgement that the hearts and minds of the American people are not with pro-life, anti-abortion people like myself on this question. It is wildly unpopular with the American people, and it's insane for conservatives over and over again to delude themselves into thinking that's not true.
Does she have a strategy? Because I agree with her that from her perspective, they should stop with a strategy that loses and adopt a strategy that wins.
Yeah.
But what is that? Do they have
No, it reminds me actually of repeal and replace, because Lila Rose knows exactly what she supports on the question of abortion. What that looks like in states like Ohio, translating into how candidates talk about this, what policy initiatives might be on the ballot or fought from getting on the ballot is a completely different question. People felt really good about coalescing around that 15-week bill, although there was some internal grumbling among the right flank in sort of conservative circles about whether or not that was appropriate, because it's still 15 weeks and the majority of abortions are happening before that. So there's just, it is similar to repeal and replace in the extent that it's like nobody quite knows where the sweet spot is, and nobody can decide on a consensus position because there's such a intensity of thought on one side about where those guardrails should be, and such an intensity. There was, I thought, just quickly, a really bad headline I saw last night in the Messenger that said Republicans were, they said something like Republicans were overjoyed when Roe v. Wade fell, and now it's become one of their biggest electoral problems. I'm paraphrasing it, but something like that. Republicans were not overjoyed when Roe v. Wade fell.
Elite Republicans were like, wait a minute, what are you doing?
They were, and we were on the air when it, literally when it happened, and I remember saying something to the extent of like, the RNC is freaking out right now, like quaking in their boots, and someone who would have knowledge of that came up to me afterwards and was like, I was listening when you said that. I was there, basically, and it was 100% accurate. So Republican voters may have been overjoyed by the fall of Roe. Republicans here were terrified.
Dog overjoyed, he has caught car.
Yeah.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.